It's now my great privilege to introduce our keynote speaker to kick off the 2018 Global Force Symposium and Exhibition, and who better to do that than the Secretary of the Army. You know Dr. Esper. He's a 1986 graduate of the United States Military Academy at West Point. He has served in the regular Army, the Army National Guard, and the Army Reserve. He's a combat veteran with the 101st Airborne Division Air Assault. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the 23rd Secretary of the Army, Dr. Mark Esper.
Hey, thanks, General Ham. Thank you very much. Well, good morning, everyone. Yeah, there we go. I hope you all got a good night's sleep. Got your PT in today, right? That sounded pretty weak. You better get to the fitness walk, like General Ham said, if you didn't get your PT in. Well, thank you, General Ham, for that gracious introduction, and thank you as well for your 38 years of service in uniform, taking care of our young men and women, and also for your outstanding leadership of the AUSA. So thank you very much. Your commitment to our soldiers, our veterans, and our civilians and family members of the total force is well known by all. I want to thank also the leaders, staff, and associates who worked hard to make this year's Global Force Symposium a reality. And I also want to thank Mayor Tommy Battle and the City of Huntsville for once again hosting this event. I've been to Huntsville several times. This is the first time I learned that the city motto is spend your money. So I'll keep that in mind on my next visit. I have about 30 minutes today, but I promise not to bore you with a long speech. But I do ask that you pay attention, take good notes, particularly if you're in uniform. We have 3 open spots for Kwajalein Atoll, an unaccompanied tour. So I have my staff watching, all uniformed military here. If you fall asleep or you look at your phone, then you're going to have a nice assignment this summer. Let me begin my remarks this morning by setting the stage, if you will, with a brief description of the strategic environment. The United States is coming out of the longest conflict in its history. There is tension between defense and domestic spending as the national debt grows. There is social turbulence and political disharmony in America that divides many. Other Western democracies are experiencing the same. And as we focus largely on an irregular war in one region, Moscow has taken advantage of our preoccupation and expanded its influence elsewhere. The Army faces internal challenges as well. The force is strained by an unrelenting operational tempo. We are challenged by unpredictable budgets. Our equipment is showing its age. Maintenance costs are increasing, and procurements have been delayed to pay for readiness. Finally, recruiting is becoming ever more challenging. To address these challenges, the Army's leaders recognize the service must change, and that change must be big. The year I'm talking about, of course, is 1973. 1973 was a critical moment in the Army's history, an inflection point from which visionary leaders like former Chief of Staff General Creighton Abrams would stabilize, reorganize, and modernize the Army. In fact, he would make many of these same points years later in testimony before Congress. Abrams' efforts would allow others, like Generals William Depew and Don Starry, to fundamentally transform the Army, redesigning it from the ground up, from how we recruit soldiers using an uncertain and dubious system at the time that would depend on volunteers, to revamping the Army's doctrine, formations, and equipment. Their vision? Be prepared to fight and win a high-end conflict in Europe against the Soviet Union. The lessons of the 1973 Yom Kippur War gave great urgency to this cause, highlighting the importance of tempo, lethality, combined arms on the modern battlefield. Army leaders were sent to the Middle East to study and learn from this conflict, much like we've done in eastern Ukraine. Those leaders knew what was at stake, that tough choices had to be made, and that if they failed, the Army would fail. These men faced a great deal of internal resistance and skepticism, but they had a vision and the will to see it through. Their vision was the Army that many of you and I grew up in. It was the Army of the Airland Battle, the Big Five, the National Training Center, and the All-Volunteer Force. It was the Army built to defeat the Soviets in the Fulda Gap, and that instead enabled the USSR's collapse. It's the Army that crushed the fourth largest army in the world in the 1991 Gulf War, and the one that raced from Kuwait to seize Baghdad in a few short weeks in 2003. And it is the Army that adapted to the conflicts in Iraq and Afghanistan to achieve battlefield success time and time again against elusive enemies. However, it is also the Army that we still have today, 45 years after Creighton Abrams envisioned it, and it's showing its age. While many of the external dynamics we face today are strikingly similar to those faced by the Army in 1973, there are some distinct differences between now and then. We have a supportive Congress and an American public that respects the U.S. military more than any other government institution. We have a private sector that is innovating far faster than any other time in history. And, importantly, we have the most professional Army the world has ever known, an all-volunteer force made up the best our country has to offer. An Army of exceptional officers and NCOs who lead young men and women of great commitment and unmatched lethality. The Army's leaders of 1973 would envy the hand we have to play today, but we have it because they dealt it. It is now up to us to play those cards well. Because while we've been rightly focused on fighting and winning in the Middle East, China and Russia have invested in advanced technologies, professionalized their militaries, and changed facts on the ground that have reduced our military advantage. Both countries are modernizing their militaries at a pace that is steadily eroding our capabilities overmatch and improving their ability to threaten our national interests. Russia has demonstrated this in eastern Ukraine, Crimea, and Syria, while China has become increasingly aggressive against its neighbors and more assertive in the South China Sea. And even if we never face Russia and China on the modern battlefield, we should expect to see their weapons, equipment, and tactics used by adversaries against us. This brings to mind North Korea and Iran. Rogue regimes like these will continue to threaten regional stability, our allies, and U.S. security interests. At the same time, we know that violent extremist organizations like ISIS will be around for a long time. As such, unlike the post-Vietnam era, we must retain irregular warfare as a core competency in the years ahead. Taken together, the sum of these challenges reflect fundamental changes to the character of warfare: speed, lethality, constant surveillance, disrupted communications, and formidable threats in every domain, including cyberspace, space, and information. To win as part of the joint force in this environment, Army forces, active, guard, and reserve, must be ready and able to deploy rapidly. We must be able to overcome our adversaries' defenses to gain a foothold, maintain access, and exploit success. On the battlefield, Army forces must remain mobile, maneuver boldly, and quickly deliver precise, lethal, and overwhelming effects in, through, and across every domain. And we must do it faster than the enemy if we are to win. Despite the changing character of warfare, its nature remains constant, as does the mission of the Army: to deploy, fight, and win our nation's wars. So given our mission, the threats we face, and the increasing complexity of the global security environment, I want to share with you our vision of the Army 10 years from today. It is a vision fully consistent with the National Defense Strategy, and one that General Milley and I believe will ensure our overwhelming success for years to come. So here we go. The Army of 2028 will be ready to deploy, fight, and win decisively against any adversary, anytime, and anywhere, in a joint, multi-domain, high-intensity conflict, while simultaneously deterring others and maintaining its ability to conduct irregular warfare. Further, and this is very important, the Army will do this through employment of modern manned and unmanned ground combat vehicles, aircraft, sustainment systems, and weapons, coupled with robust combined arms formations and tactics based on a modern warfighting doctrine and centered on exceptional leaders and soldiers of unmatched lethality. To achieve this vision, the Army must meet several objectives when it comes to manning, training, organizing, and equipping the force. With this vision, we all have a number of tasks to work in the coming years. Let's walk through them. Doctrine. Doctrine is how the Army fights and is fundamental to transforming the Army of 2028. Much like a transmission synchronizes inputs through gears and produces a stronger output, doctrine synchronizes the Army's core functions to produce greater lethality. Active defense in 1976 evolved into refined airland battle doctrine by 1986. It happened alongside the reorganization of armor and mechanized and light infantry units, the development of the Big Five weapon systems, the standardization of training, and the establishment of the combat training centers. A decade from now, the concept of multi-domain battle must become a fully developed doctrine embedded at every echelon and propagated through all of our schools and professional development courses. All Army leaders must be fluent in its principles, tenets, and applications. And a decade from now, the lessons we learn from the multi-domain task force that will be prototyped next year will help inform how we organize, train, and employ many of our formations. That's why advancing our doctrine will be one of the major lines of effort we will push over the coming years. Organize. The Army of 2028 must be organized appropriately. We must identify necessary changes to our force structure to ensure our tactical formations have sufficient capability and capacity in movement and maneuver, fires, protection, sustainment, and intelligence. A decade from now, our formations must be more robust, agile, and lethal. A decade from now, they must have overmatch in all battlefield operating systems, including EW and cyber. We have already begun making these organizational changes. For example, we are increasing the capability of our formations, returning short-range air defense and multiple launch rocket systems battalions to our divisions. Manning. To meet the challenges of 2028 and beyond, the total Army must grow. A decade from now, we need an active component above 500,000 soldiers with associated growth in the Guard and Reserve. We must focus on recruiting and retaining high-quality, physically fit, mentally tough soldiers who will deploy and fight and win decisively on any future battlefield. A decade from now, the soldiers we recruit today will be our company commanders and platoon sergeants. That's why we're considering several initiatives, from a new physical fitness regime to reforming and extending basic training in order to ensure our young men and women are prepared for the rigors of high-intensity combat. In the next few years, we will also need to transform our personnel system, basing it more on the principles and practices of talent management found in the private sector. It needs to be much more open, flexible, and dynamic so that we can better attract, develop, and retain the best and brightest our nation has to offer. Effective talent management is essential to the Army of 2028. This is a second major line of effort that we will pursue in the coming years. Training. The hallmarks of quality training have been consistent since the dawn of conflict. It must be tough, realistic, and dynamic, and it must be frequent, with sufficient repetition to ensure the Army of 2028 will be ready for the battlefield of the future. Our training must focus on high-intensity conflict with an emphasis on urban operations in electronically austere environments, meaning no or limited comms or data, and under constant surveillance. This will require rapid expansion of our synthetic training environment and deeper distribution of simulations capabilities down to battalions and companies to significantly enhance soldier and team effectiveness. It also demands that we stop doing things at home station. Much of this non-statutory mandatory training directed from above that inhibits our readiness and lethality, that we curtail many of the additional duties and reporting requirements that weigh down our junior leaders, and that we re-empower and expect our NCOs to train and coach and lead their soldiers, not relegate responsibility for these duties to online training and outside experts. You should expect to see more guidance on this in the near future from me and the Chief of Staff. Equipping. A modern Army must be well equipped with the most advanced, capable, and survivable combat systems industry can provide quickly. A decade from now, and preferably sooner, we will see our formations begin to field a variety of manned and unmanned combat vehicles, aircraft, sustainment systems, and weapons. Greater use of autonomous systems, robotics, and AI promises to make our units more lethal, our soldiers less vulnerable, and the Army far, far more effective. It will also allow us to fill more capacity with greater capability. This will be the Army of 2028. This is why modernization is our third major line of effort. We will modernize the force by first reforming the current Big A acquisition system and unifying the modernization enterprise under a single command. Based on the future strategic environment it is charged with envisioning, this command will develop requirements more quickly, ensure unity of effort, establish accountability, and begin delivering the next generation of weapons, vehicles, and equipment. We will be guided by principles embodied in phrases such as cross-functional teaming, unchanging priorities, best value, prototype to learn and refine, demonstrate to prove, fail early, fail cheap, buy and adapt, product over process, preserve competition to drive innovation, incremental development, and speed, speed, speed as imperative because lives are at stake. We will be looking to the private sector for solutions, not just a series of requirements to meet or KPPs to check off a list. And we must not allow the perfect to be the enemy of the better. We view industry as partners. We seek to do much more with the commercial sector, and we are more than willing to buy and adapt equipment used by our sister services and allies. We view foreign sales as a way to build partnerships and enhance interoperability with our allies, as a way to lower our own unit costs, and as a means to improve fielded systems. But it also means that we expect our vendors to deliver quality products on time and on budget, that our contracts will reflect these expectations, and that we will insist on performance. After all, the lives of our soldiers, the success of our Army, and the fate of our nation rests in large part on the weapons and equipment they are provided. This brings me back to our current modernization efforts. To address the challenges we face, the Army must once again embark on change, much like Abrams, DePuy, and Starry did 40-plus years ago. We have a comprehensive plan to ensure our long-term technological dominance. It begins with cross-functional teams, but it will see its full embodiment with the creation of Army Futures Command. The Undersecretary, Vice, and other Army leaders will outline AFC and the path ahead in some detail today. So for now, I just want to highlight the following. Futures Command in 2018 is as critical to the Army of the 2020s, 2030s, and 2040s as TRADOC, AMC, and FORSCOM were in 1973 to the Army of the 1980s, 1990s, and 2000s. Futures Command epitomizes our commitment to smart, bold reform and to improving the future lethality of the force. Futures Command will address the key shortcomings of the current acquisition and make improvements well beyond them. Futures Command will focus on the future environment and the forces we will need at that time. Futures Command will ensure we have technological overmatch against the Chinese and Russians and any other potential adversary for years to come. In short, Futures Command is essential to achieving the Army vision I outlined. Abrams, DePuy, and Starry had their detractors, the naysayers who insisted that their reforms couldn't happen, and the skeptics who questioned every action. And predictably, we have some of those too. To them, I would say that we recognize that Futures Command must be capable of learning and evolving, just as the threats we face continuously change. Through engaged leadership, personal conviction, and a good deal of grit, Abrams and other men implemented bold change, and we will do so again. We have no choice. Organizations that don't change risk failure. The Army's leaders understood that in the 1970s, and our leadership understands this today. Decades from now, I believe our successors will look back and thank today's Chief of Staff, General Mark Milley, for his leadership, his vision, and his willingness to confront the future, to reshape and reorient the Army. And they will recognize other Army leaders as well, generals by the name of McConville, Abrams, Perna, Townsend, Perkins, and some of you. I'll close by assuring you that our Army is the most lethal and effective land force the world has ever seen. It is well-led, capable, and increasingly prepared for the ever more complex and dangerous environment we face as we enter this era of great competition. And if the war tocsin was to sound today, I'm confident we would prevail in any conflict against any foe. We can say this thanks to the foresight of a generation of leaders who, when faced with an array of daunting challenges, chose to see opportunities and not problems. They seized the moment, one that became an historic inflection point. They demonstrated the ability to imagine, the courage to change, and the will to create an army that won the Cold War and served our nation well for a generation. We owe it to the next generation to do the same. Thank you.